Sounds True presents Music as Medicine, Session 5, Harmonics, Bridge to the Spirit, with Kay Gardner.
At the beginning of this course, we experienced some sounds that had other sounds attached to them. Now that sounds a little vague, but what I mean is with every sound that occurs, there are other sounds that are occurring simultaneously, and these are called overtones or harmonics. So with every drone sound that occurs, whether it's on an instrument or whether it's on the voice, we would call those sounds, the drone sounds, struck sound that we are creating in one way or another, by plucking a string, by playing an instrument, by chanting. That is struck sound. But there are other sounds that are happening simultaneously, and those are called unstruck sounds. And the unstruck sounds are harmonics or overtones. It's a natural phenomenon. It's a law of nature. When the wind is blowing through the tops of trees or across telephone wires, it isn't just one tone that you hear. It's a chord. It's a chord that is called nature's chord because it is totally natural. The drone invites the overtones. When we heard the drone instruments, such as the didgeridoo and the tambura, there was this nasal quality to the sound of these instruments. And that nasal quality means that the overtones are present. In an oboe, a very nasal sounding instrument, you'll hear all the harmonics, and that's why it's a nasal sounding instrument. That's why the tambura drone has this nasal quality, because all of the overtones are present in its sound, unlike the flute. Which has a very pure sound, a sound that has very few overtones in it, and that's what gives it its pure sound. Well, let's look deeper into just what overtones are. For the most part, overtones are the same things as harmonics. Harmonics occur in a specific pattern. Overtones occur in a specific pattern. Not all overtones are harmonics, but harmonics are all overtones. Sometimes you'll get some unstruck sound above a struck sound that doesn't fall within the sequence that we call the harmonic sequence. But for the most part, we're talking here about harmonics. I'm going to demonstrate with a children's toy just what harmonics can do. The toy is called a 5-tone twirling toy. It kind of looks like a long vacuum cleaner tube. It's corrugated, and so I'm just going to scrape my fingernail across the corrugated part to show you what the resonance of the toy or the instrument is. Now, when I take this instrument and stand in the middle of the room and start twirling it around my head slowly with my arm up extended, the first tone you're going to hear is an octave above the resonance of the instrument itself that you heard me just do. Now, if I whirl the toy a little faster, I get another tone, and that tone is a fifth above the octave. If I whirl it a little faster yet, I get 2 octaves above the original octave, or 3 octaves above the instrument's resonance. And if I whirl it a little faster, I get the third above that octave. So there is a specific sequence. So let me do the whole thing again. I'm going to scrape the corrugated part of the instrument just to show you what the resonance of the instrument itself is. And then whirling it faster and faster, you will hear the overtones climb in a specific sequence as the air goes across the opening. Now my flute is also a tube. I'm not going to whirl it around my head, but I can demonstrate on the flute itself how overtones occur. I'm going to finger the very lowest note on my flute, and without lifting my fingers to change the notes at all, I'm going to overblow. I'm going to blow a little harder, and you will hear what sequence of sounds occur. Not pretty, but this shows you that there is a specific sequence of tones when I close all the keys on my flute, and the sequence is always the same. Let me play it on the keyboard. And when we get up to the fourth octave of overtones, we get an actual scale. I can't go to the fifth octave because the notes would fall in between the keys, in the cracks between the keys. This instrument cannot play what the fifth octave of overtones sounds like because they're too close together. But they get closer and closer together as they climb higher and higher. This is the chord. All of these tones together you would hear when the wind blows across the tops of trees, or across ice plains, or across even telephone wires. This is nature's chord. You will not hear the highest tones as clearly as the lower tones, the octave and the fifth. All music, both Eastern and Western, is based on the first two harmonics, on the octave and the fifth. This is why when we hear drone instruments from India or the didgeridoo, these are the tones that we hear the easiest because they are lower, they have a lower vibration, they're more easily perceived by our ears than the higher overtones. But Pythagoras, who was known as the father of healing music and also the father of geometry, who lived on the Greek island of Samos in about 600 BC, identified something called the music of the spheres. And the music of the spheres were the unstruck sounds that he was able to hear. In deep meditation, one will be able to hear all the way up through the octaves of overtones. In India, the fourth octave of overtones has a name. It is a specific scale, and the name of that scale is Saraswati. It is named after the goddess of music. Let me play a little in that scale, the fourth octave of overtone scale. This scale sounds a little strange to our Western ears, but it is the scale of nature. It is a raga, an Indian scale, and it is the most natural scale that we have. It is said that as Pythagoras was on his deathbed, he said to his followers, "Study the monochord," because it was believed that if you knew the sounds of the monochord, that all mysteries of earth and universe would be revealed to you. A monochord is a one-stringed instrument, and we don't go to the store to buy monochords these days, but we can do a monochord exercise on a guitar. Harry Partch, a wonderful composer, famous in the 1940s and 50s, said, "A stretched string is a thing of beauty." And that might be said about the monochord or any stringed instrument, in that when I pluck the string itself, like this, now if I take the guitar string and put my finger very lightly so that I have divided the string into two equal parts, I will get what? I get the octave. If I take that string and divide it into quarters, I get the fifth. And mathematically, as I move up the string, dividing it into smaller and smaller units, I will get the entire harmonic sequence. This seemed a miracle to Pythagoras and his followers, and their term, the music of the spheres, came from the overtones that they were able to create on the monochord. If we look at it mathematically, each overtone is a multiple of the fundamental or root tone. For example, if the lowest note that I play on the keyboard vibrates at 50 cycles per second, the octave above it vibrates at 100 cycles per second. The next harmonic, or the fifth, vibrates at 150 cycles per second. The next harmonic, or octave, vibrates at 200 cycles per second. And we move to 250 for the third, 300 for the fifth above that, 350 for the seventh above that, 400 for the octave, 450, 500, 550, 600, 650, 700, 750, 800. So by the time we get to the fourth octave, we're at 800. We began at 50. The distance between each harmonic is equal to the vibration of the root tone, the first tone, the struck sound. I'm just using those numbers for demonstration purposes. The very first note or root sound that I used doesn't actually vibrate at 50, but it's just easier to explain it that way. During the segment on toning, I made several sounds. Some sounds that could be used for breaking up blockages. You might recall the rather loud sounds I was making to help relieve constipation. And when I demonstrated different techniques of toning, I used the different vowels, and you heard this very nasal quality in my voice. The voice can be used as a curative instrument, and harmonics are an integral part of it. I talked earlier about Vicky Dodd, a sound healer, and how she worked doing body work using different sounds, starting with the sound of the dis-ease, the emotional distress, which she would duplicate. It would be a very dissonant sound and not a pleasant sound. If it was deep pain, she would duplicate that sound. And then moving from that sound and out of that sound would rise overtones or harmonics. Here's an example of vocal harmonics with Vicky Dodd, starting with the dissonance, with the sound of the pain, and moving the sound from the dissonance into the harmonics. It's very important to express pain as it's happening. Very important. But the sound of the pain, the dissonant sound that comes out of the pain, can be transformed and can balance us and help heal us by the use of the harmonics. As children, we've probably made these sounds just naturally. You hear kids playing on a beach or playing in a backyard somewhere, and they're playing with sounds, especially 4-year-olds. They're playing with sounds. Babies even do it when they first realize they have voices. They're making sounds. And you better believe they're making some of these unstruck sounds because they're experimenting with their voices. As adults, again, we get pretty repressed about it. And we don't make the vocal sounds that we made as children or that perhaps our ancestors made in more primitive, and I say that with great respect, societies. Earlier, we experienced the vowels in order and how they relate to the chakras, how they relate to the layers of the aura, and how they relate to colors and to perfumes or scent. And the vowels are oo, o, aw, ah, eh, I, and e. And there's a reason why I gave the vowels to you in this order. Because the vowels in this order touch each chakra, and as we learned earlier, each chakra relates to a different layer of the aura. It is my feeling that when we chant these vowels and the overtones that occur with each vowel, we are balancing each chakra in turn. We are also balancing the energy field around ourselves and bringing ourselves, thus, to balance. And what is balance but healing? What is healing but balance? In many world cultures, the way to call upon the deity is through the chanting of vowels. And I gave you the example earlier of the Hebrew Yahweh calling the deity through vowel sounds. In Egyptian history, there were also vowels used to call upon the deities. What happens with the vowels when they go in this order is you will access a different harmonic for each vowel. A different overtone will happen for each vowel. Let me demonstrate. This is best heard if you close your eyes. Now, if you're driving, I don't suggest that you close your eyes. But if you are sitting in a place where you may do that, you will hear better with your eyes closed. I learned this by sitting in orchestras for years and looking out at the matinee audience and seeing the little old ladies sitting back in their chairs with beatific smiles on their faces and eyes closed as they listen to the music. One can hear better with one's eyes closed, and you'll get the effect much better. You will hear me chant in a rather nasal way on the struck sound. And then, as I change the shape of my mouth into each vowel in turn, you will hear an overtone with each vowel. perhaps you'll want to use that exercise, taking a full breath, that I gave you earlier, so that you can hold your breath for a good long time while you're doing this and practicing this. I will give you some exercises so that you can do this, but right now, can you hear what's happening? Can you hear each little whistle-like overtone above that struck sound? Can you hear the unstruck sound? I tried to take it really slowly so that on the oo you heard the octave. On the aw you heard the fifth. On the ah you heard the next octave. On the eh you heard the third. On the I you heard the next fifth. On the E you heard the flatted seventh that follows that. And you heard that I wasn't actually saying the vowel. I was just shaping my mouth in the form of that vowel to create unstruck sound from the struck sound. Now here's how you can learn how to do this. First of all, you want to try to get a nasal sound. So try to talk like this. All right? You talk like you're holding your nose, or you're talking like you have a sinus condition, or it's very nasal and very ugly, and we're not supposed to talk like this. But it's also very penetrating, and it's a penetrating sound that'll help you get here. So talk to everyone like this today. I was teaching this at the Omega Institute, and I had a room full of people talking like this to each other. And next door was a class in psychodrama. And every once in a while, they would have to figure out how to incorporate this very annoying sound that we were all making into their psychodrama. And so they called us the killer bees. So talk to your friends like this for a while. You know, it doesn't take any more effort to talk in this tone. All you have to do is move the sound into the nasal, into the front of your face. Just try that. You're talking in your regular sound, and now you're talking in the nasal sound. No more energy at all. It's just where you place your voice. Okay. You know, if you're going off to a restaurant, what's going to bring the waiter over faster? Waiter or waiter? They'll be there right away. So, you're getting pretty good at this. Good. Okay. Now, I learned how to make these sounds from Jonathan Goldman, my spirit brother. He's written a book called Healing Sounds, which explains all about harmonics, where they come from, how you make them, and he taught me years ago how to do this, and I was just taken with it, and I think you will be too. You have to have understanding friends and family, because it is pretty strange, but you'll get hooked on it just as I did. I find the best place to practice these weird sounds is in the car. He taught me by using the word her. Say the word her, and then move it into your nose. So like this. Her. 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 Got it? Now once you know how to get into the nose area, then you can try using the word wow very slowly in an exaggerated way. Say the word wow thus. Her. Her. Can you hear your harmonics? Can you hear the cascade of your overtones climbing, your harmonics climbing, and then coming back down as the shape of your mouth changes? With the oo, you hear the low tones, and we get up to the wah sound where the mouth is more open, and they climb. And then we go back down to the ow, and you hear them cascade down again. Let's try it again. Her. Her. There they are. Very easy to access. Now you might want to try the word Y. We talked about the word Y earlier and how it contains all the vowels in exact sequence. U, O, A, A, I, and E. Put them all together, they spell Y. Now get into the nose again. Her, ha, Now you can do it just as well with your mouth closed and just moving the tongue closer and closer to the roof of your mouth. The Tibetans end the chant Om with the sound ng, because that gets as close to the palate as the tongue can get, and you will hear an array of harmonics in your head by chanting the M sound and then moving the tongue closer and closer to the palate to create the higher harmonics. Think of your head as a temple. It's interesting to know that part of the head is called temple, the temples on the side of the head. So the head is like this wonderful domed temple. And when you are creating these sounds, different parts of your head are vibrating. As your tongue is getting closer and closer to the roof of your mouth, you are touching points that relate to different organs in the body. Because the top of your mouth, much like acupuncture points, has points that relate to the different organs in the body. So you're not only balancing your aura, you're not only touching your chakras, but when you're doing it with the hum and the palate, when you're doing a hum or an om or a closed mouth sound moving into ng, you are touching each of these points on the roof of your mouth, each of these points that balances each of the organs in your body. Now that you have learned how to create vocal harmonics, unstruck sound, you may want to go off and try it for a while. You'll find that resonant places are the best places to do it. You might want to learn it in the car, but if you want to take it a step further, you could do it in your shower. If it's a nice tile shower, you could find a canyon to do it in. If you live in the city, you could do it late at night between some tall buildings. You could also try it in a parking garage. Any place that's resonant, and it'll give the sound back to you. Jonathan showed me doing it with a crystal that has a large, flat facet, and doing it against the crystal will amplify the sound. So there's many experiments you can do while you are creating these vocal harmonics. One of the masters of vocal harmonics used more as an aesthetic experience than as a pragmatic experience, as we heard with Vicky Dodd, is David Hikes, who has a harmonic choir, where Vicky Dodd is working with the harmonics arising from dissonance. Hikes is using harmonics arising from consonance. Here's an example of Hikes's advanced melodic use of harmonics. Note how the unstruck sounds make harmony with the struck sound. So Hikes has created a piece of music by moving the fundamental, the struck sound with his voice, and adjusting the shape of his mouth to create this wonderful harmony with his own fundamental. When composing music, composers can also use harmonics because every instrument can create these ethereal sounds. In my own work, Viriditas, a piece written for people who are going through life-threatening disease, I used this effect with instruments in the middle of the piece to lift the listener out of physical consciousness, taking them to a transcendent place. And so that this can be used by composers also in music to create an ethereal mood. The vibration of harmonics, as we explained earlier, each harmonic touches a different layer of the aura. And as we are climbing in the harmonic scale, we are using the harmonics almost as a stairway to the spiritual. Here I have the instruments climbing higher and higher until they reach a peak. And at the top of the peak, all of the instruments, including that twirling toy that we heard earlier, all of the instruments are playing harmonics. Listen to the effect. Feel the effect. And so the harp, using a technique called feathering, took us all the way up to the top where the instruments play the harmonics, took us out, and then the harp, using the same technique, brought us back down again to the solid ground. You may feel spacey after creating these harmonics. If you do, my suggestion is that you drum your hands or your feet on the ground. You may want to stand up and stamp your feet while saying ho, ho, ho. This will give you contact with Mother Earth, and you won't be floating around. After working with harmonics, it is essential that you ground yourself before you go about your daily work. Harmonics, the stairway to the spiritual. A balancing technique. A technique that you can use to get in touch with your own dissonance, your own dis-ease, and help to transform it by making the sound of the dis-ease and allowing the harmonics to grow naturally out of those sounds, or by using the techniques I've given you. Remembering that each vowel creates a different unstruck sound, and that each vowel also vibrates each of the chakras and each layer of your aura. So chanting harmonics and doing them with the vowels in the sequence I've given you gives you a technique to balance your aura and thus balance your entire being. In our next session, we're going to look at repetition, the power of repeated sounds, and how they can be healing.
This concludes Session 5. Please turn the tape over for Session 6.